On today's episode of the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast, Maxwell Baumbach and I are sharing with you our top 7 prospects on our 2026 preseason NBA draft boards. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings, your daily podcast on the future stars of the NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Nathan Grubel, scouting consultant, contributor to No Ceilings, scout over the last 14 years. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network and are available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Join me this week, as he always does, my co-host, creator of the No Stone Unturned series for No Ceilings NBA, is Maxwell Baumbach. Maxwell, how we doing?
I'm doing great. College basketball is back. I couldn't be happier. We are now fully back in the full swing of draft season, and it's a great time to be alive, and it's a great time to talk about the top 7 players on our board.
I was going to say, we're back in the full swing of things with the NBA draft because we're sharing the top 7 of our 2026 NBA draft big preseason big boards today. So excited. We have a number of players who I couldn't be higher on. I know Maxwell's got some guys who might bring a few spicy takes in here. So I'm so excited to get into this. Before we do get started, I want to shout out the other members of the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings team. Both Tyler Rucker, Tyler Metcalf just released an episode covering Arkansas's guard prospects and Malik Thomas and Darius Acuff, and then Corey Tulaba and Albert Gim covered Arizona's Braden Burries and why he's one of the best bucket getters in this upcoming draft class. Both episodes are available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Maxwell, let's start off at the very top. Let's give the people what they want right out of the gate. Our number 1 and number 2 prospects on our big boards. I'll share my prospects. You share yours, and then you can get into why you have these guys at 1 and 2 in your big boards. Cat's out of the bag. I got Cam Boozer, number 1 on my board. No shock to anyone who follows me on Twitter at Draft Deeper. I've been tweeting it out for a few weeks now. He's my number 1 guy. And then just behind him, I have Darryn Peterson going to Kansas at number 2. Who are the top 2 guys on your board?
I have Cam Boozer from Duke at number 1 and Darryn Peterson from Kansas at number 2. I think I'm a lot less firm on that pairing than you might be. And we'll get into the reasons for that in a little bit. But do you want to cook on Cam a little bit? Because I know this is one that you're very fired up and passionate about. And I am too. He's number 1 on my board for a reason. And I think all these guys are great. So
more than happy to cook on Cam Boozer. 6'9", 250 pounds, reported 7-foot wingspan, 5-star high school prospect going to Duke, Donald's All-American, 3-time Florida Mr. Basketball, 2-time Gatorade National Player of the Year. One of the biggest reasons why I'm so high on Cam Boozer is because this guy has won at every single level. He's been a high school champion. He's been an AAU champion, Peat Jam, 2-time FIBA gold medalist. He has records all over the place. This guy just loves to do nothing more than win basketball games. He's a champion. He's a fundamentalist. When you talk about his game on the court, every single aspect of his game is cerebral. He can use both hands. He's got excellent footwork. He's become a much better jump shooter over his time in high school and on the AAU circuit. He's arguably going to be the best rebounder coming into college basketball next season. Awesome interior finisher. Really, to me, the biggest things where I want to see him continue to impact the game, which I believe he will, I want to see more of that passing ability. You see when he does take advantage of his outlet ability and transition, when he's able to find guys in the short roll or in the short post, he's able to make those snappy, connective decisions that can bring teammates together. I mean, everyone saw the highlight play for Duke's first exhibition game against Tennessee, where he snatched that ball out of the air on a block and then immediately fired off a transition pass. I mean, those are the types of plays you want to see from Boozer. And to me, it's just the completeness of his game. No, he's not the most elite of athletes. I do have a few questions in terms of how he's going to immediately translate out of the gate on the defensive end of the floor. I think he's going to be good, certainly around the basket, but when guys pull him away from the basket, does he have that same ability to cover that much ground? There are a few questions there, but overall, just in terms of his pedigree, his impact on winning, and his well-rounded skill set, I have the fewest questions about Cameron Boozer. And it's not that this may not change at different points throughout the draft cycle, but I just think right now, to me, it's a closed shut case in terms of who starts the year at number 1 on my board. I think it has to be Cam Boozer.
So I will touch on Boozer a little bit, and then I'll make kind of the Yang case if you were to go Peterson at 1. So with Boozer, I totally get it. Like, this is a guy who is a dominant rebounder, an incredibly polished interior scorer, a really smart passer, and he does produce on the defensive end. And like when I was writing my column this week, which go check out, NoCeilingsNBA.com, 10 must-scout games the first week of the college season, with Cam, it feels like he's in the right spots at the right times defensively. Where I get tripped up is just like, what is sort of the offensive creation equity going to be? Because he's a little bit more comfortable with his back to the basket. He doesn't have this great first step. His pull-up, the numbers on it are good, but it's a little bit slow, a little bit clunky. That's got to get faster. And then defensively, like you said, he's not the most fleet of foot. I don't feel totally comfortable with him on an island. There's some talk that the measurements aren't going to be great. And then if they're not, can you really play him at center? Like, these are real issues that could be potential ceiling cappers for him. Whereas Peterson, I think the upside is that this is a guy who is already NBA wing size. It's 6'6", 205 pounds, who has wing skills, but has guard skills too, right? Like, a great self-creator, very unique kind of like, he's like this sort of herky-jerky mover. And at Prolific Prep last season, I pulled this from the article, per synergy last year, 70.6% on half-court rim attempts, 41.5% on pull-up threes. And if you're betting on
a pretty good profile,
8 shots for themselves at the NBA level, I want a guy who can do it at the rim and do it behind the three-point line. And that's what we've seen from Darryn Peterson. And I also think he's just really excelled in his growth as a passer. Tyler Metcalf did a great article in his New Man on Campus series at NoCeilingsNBA.com, which I'd highly recommend. Going into that sort of development over his game, where like, it's not fully consistent yet. Like, it's not a lead guard playmaking passing portfolio yet, but when you consider the amount of scoring gravity that he has and the fact that we've already seen him make every type of pass pretty consistently, this is not a guy who's just reliant and racking up assists based on solely feeding the roller, or a guy who, you know, only looks for the weak side corner. Like, he can make some pretty advanced reads on the go and read where help is coming from and adapt to it. And I think that on-ball playmaking equity paired with his multi-level scoring, paired with the fact that he does have athletic tools and a movement profile that lends itself to the NBA, where you can envision him shaking defenders and creating these advantages at the next level. With Cam Boozer, it's like, I think he's going to be able to overpower a lot of guys, but when he's matched up with another big guy that has some meat on his bones, like, where is that advantage coming from? Is he fast enough? Does he have a good enough dribble game? I don't know. Where with Darryn, I think it's easy for me to buy into this on-ball creation, turning into an offensive superstar. I think an offensive superstar outcome is on the table because it's so rare to have all of these traits in conjunction with one another. Yep. I think, again, I'm going to keep plugging the website. Quinn Fishburne, debut article this week for NoCeilingsNBA.com, did a great job of breaking down his issues as a shooter off the catch. I think he does as good as he is pulling up. He wasn't good on mid-range pull-ups, and I think a lot of that is because he took some really bad shots in that area of the floor. I do want to see the handle stuff come along, especially against heavy, aggressive ball screen coverages. I think he's got the VJ Edgecombe deep takeoff point issue, which I think has been fine in the NBA. And on ball, I think like his defense is good and like he gets a ton of stocks. Like, he makes plays defensively. I think the defense will ultimately be good. Right now, the on ball footwork thing that drives me crazy is he's very over dramatic with his footwork, where he like when he lunges, he puts his weight on the wrong foot. So he's like really sort of heavy laterally and clunky and can get beat off the dribble by guys that shouldn't beat him off the dribble. Just how he's distributing his weight and how he's moving his body, which I think he can fix. So I do ultimately buy Cam Boozer for the reasons we talked about. This is a guy who wins everywhere he's been, stuffs the stat sheet. I think he can shoot. I think he can score inside and out. I think he's going to figure out the defense. I'm just a little nervous about how it profiles athletically. And I don't have that question about Darryn. I just wonder if the in-between stuff isn't there and he's like totally devoid of off the catch shooting. There's worlds where like all of a sudden he's just like a really good second option or a really good third option, where I feel like really confident being like Cam Boozer will be an awesome second or third option. Where with Darryn, I think if the really high end stuff doesn't come along, it gets a little bit more rickety than it does with Cam.
So here's the thing with Darryn. I completely buy the scoring talent like you laid out. I buy not just the pull-up shooting talent. I think he's going to figure out the catch and shoot three. I think the biggest things for me with him are in relation to his on-ball playmaking. And I think the context is going to be key because this Kansas team, we're not necessarily going to sit here and run through their whole roster. They aren't devoid of talent. Mm-hmm. What I will say about Kansas, you'll see this early on, they have a lot of players who will need to be set up in order to be the most optimal versions of themselves. And that burden, that responsibility is going to fall on Darryn's shoulders pretty early out of the gate. So the question for me is, if Darryn's going to project as this number one overall, I'm going to have the ball in my hands, do it all on offense, is he able to consistently lift the ceilings of those around him in Kansas and make them the best versions of themselves? If that's an area where he's going to struggle, and it turns out that Darryn is at his best, again, a very reliable defensive player in the backcourt, can certainly guard multiple positions. Like you talked about, Maxwell profiles as a wing based on his size. And then if he can score from all three levels, I'm not poo-pooing on that guy by any means. That's a player who you want on your NBA team. But the thing about it is, if we're going to project who to me has the safest floor and ceiling as a every single night contributor in the NBA, you know that even if the ball's not going in the basket for him, like we saw with Cam in that exhibition already for Duke versus Tennessee, he contributed so many other areas to where I just have little questions about what I'm going to get from him on a night-to-night basis. I think that to me makes him a safer option and number one right out of the gate. But with Darryn, like you talked about, Maxwell, if he does answer some of those questions on the ball right out of the gate, I think there's a very strong chance that he's not only number one, pretty much in the consensus of a lot of scouts' eyes at this point of the process, he could be number one across everyone's board within about a month and a half into the college season if he answers a lot of those questions. So I don't necessarily question anyone who has Darryn Peterson number one on their boards right now. I think it's a very close race between him and Cam. I am excited, though, when we get back from our first break to talk about our number 3 and number 4 prospects. So I think a guy who we have at number 3, we shouldn't rule him out of the number 1 race altogether. Agreed. We're going to get into that when we come back. Stay tuned. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team, but that's where Game Time comes in. It's the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I personally just use Game Time to get tickets for the upcoming Philadelphia 76ers versus Detroit Pistons game on November 9th. It couldn't have been simpler. I had great seats in minutes. Take advantage of this amazing opportunity. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, and go. Thank you for making a Locked On NBA Draft podcast with no ceilings your first listen of the day. All right, Maxwell, let's shift our conversation to our 3rd and 4th prospects on our 2026 NBA Draft preseason big boards. I think number 3 for both of us is BYU's AJ Dybantsa. Big time, 6'9" wing prospect, viewed very much so as that do-it-all creator type of wing coming into college. At the high school level, he had the ball in his hands all the time, high usage creator, awesome shot creator in the mid-range, loves getting to that mid-range pull-up, can get to the rim, draw a ton of fouls, can find guys on the move when he's locked in for doing so. And then defensively, you saw it especially at the FIBA level over the summer in the U19s. This guy, when he's signed up, he can be a lockdown perimeter defender. When I say lockdown, I truly mean it. He can be that one-on-one type guy. You're not just looking for him from a production standpoint in terms of the steals and blocks, although he certainly is a deflections artist in multiple spots on the floor, but he can really keep guys in front of him. We talked about 6'9" size, his length. He can swallow up drivers, can certainly impact plays. He has incredible lateral mobility and flexibility and footwork on that end of the floor. This is a guy who has all NBA type of upside on the defensive end. And then offensively, we've laid out a lot of interesting tools where we're going to be held up. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on where it is right now. Maxwell is obviously the jump shot, right? He can get to that mid-range pull-up almost whenever he wants, but the three-point shot has been horribly inconsistent throughout his high school, AAU, and international play. It's something that I can't necessarily pinpoint to one specific thing where I'm like, if he fixes this one thing about his jump shot, he's definitely going to be a much improved shooter within a few seasons. I think there's work to be done both on the gather, on the footwork, on the release. I just don't see a lot of consistency in particular with his catch and shoot mechanics right now. I don't know how confident he is in that shot. Every single thing we hear about AJ behind the scenes, Maxwell, is that this guy's a relentless worker. He's going to figure it out and he's going to become the best version of himself. But in order to fit in with an NBA team, unless he's going to a situation like the Brooklyn Nets where they are just devoid of a basketball foundation right now, he's going to have to be a complementary player within different aspects of the game offensively. And that means you're either an electric cutter, you're always in position to take advantage of that strength, which he has the athleticism to do that, but he has to be committed to that role, or you also have to be much better at shooting the ball off the catch, from the corners, coming down to the wings and knocking down those jump shots, which make everyone else around him better. So where are you at on AJ in terms of how he can maybe split between being that on-ball type of higher usage guy versus also being a complementary player when he gets up to the NBA?
Yeah, so I really think the on-ball stuff has gotten like a hair underrated. It feels like the tide has like really shifted on him, and I get it. But I also think just the creativity, the athleticism, everything is there as a multi-level scorer. Like, this is a guy who can really get to the rim. He's also a master like foul baiter. He's really good with this pump fake around the basket and just like finding little ways to get guys off their feet. He seeks a lot of contact. Sometimes does he take exceedingly difficult shots that he maybe shouldn't take when there's multiple defenders around him to try and get a foul call? Yes, he does. But he had a .455 foul rate at Utah Prep. Like, he knows how to get to the line. And I think, we just saw him shoot the ball really poorly at FIBA. I was really down on him on this podcast feed after the FIBA performance because he shot really poorly from three. His release point is low. He shoots a flat ball. He's got to get it up, both in terms of the trajectory of the ball and the release point. That has to change for him to find consistency as a shooter. That said, his overall priors are like, they're not bad. Like, they're not bad.
They're inconsistent. I wouldn't say they're not poor, but it's just inconsistent.
And as frustrating as like his playmaking process can be, like, you look at his assist numbers compared to like a Cam Whitmore and Ace Bailey, he's not those dudes. Like, he is not, that's not going to happen with AJ Dybantsa. Like, he is a level above that. And I feel like he can get grouped in with that tier unfairly. If we are talking about that, like splitting that different zone, getting to that complementary role, if, like, let's say that this all the star stuff that I'm bandying about doesn't all come together, he's got to shoot it better off the catch, like you talked about. And I think the attention to detail defensively has to come miles if he's not a star on offense. Because right now, when, like you said, when he's engaged, the defense is awesome. He takes up a ton of room off the ball. He can really smother guys at the point of attack. Like, I do think he takes a level of pride in his on-ball defense. Away from the ball, it's so hit or miss. He can be way behind actions. If his man starts to run through something, he's lagging way behind him the whole play. Like, that stuff has to come along. So that's where I'm concerned if we're talking role player projection, almost more than the shot, is like, is this guy going to buy in defensively?
100%. I completely agree with you on some of the off-ball consistencies defensively. What I will say, you mentioned about the downhill playmaking aspect of his game. You're right. He's so much better of a playmaker than a lot of the other wings. So you could lump into the category of frustrating when they have their ball in the hands. It's not like the Cam Whitmore side of things where you just never see him do it. I think he is engaged and I think he wants to do it, but I think sometimes he gets ahead of himself and he sees some things that just aren't there. Like, in terms of when I say frustrating, right? And AJ is way more talented than this guy is, but I'm a big Philadelphia 76ers guy. I watch a lot of Philly ball. I watch a lot of Kelly Oubre. That guy is so talented. He at times actually looks to be a willing passer, but then he just makes some decisions that just make you want to pull your hair out. And I get some of those moments with AJ when I watch the tape. It's not that he doesn't do things or he can't see things. It's just he makes some of those decisions where I'm watching him and I go, AJ, you're so much better than this. Like, let's clean some of this stuff up. Let's move forward and let's get the best version out of you that we feel like you can be. Because if he is the best version of himself, if he reaches his ceiling, Maxwell, we're not having a conversation about another player at number one. Like, he has the ultimate upside of all three of these guys because he is 6'9", because he has that awesome length, that wingspan. The NBA is a size league now more than ever. You harp on it a lot in the conversations we have on text. It's so true. So if he reaches his ceiling, I'm not having an argument about another guy. We just have to see him get there. And so that's why I think AJ is starting out at number 3 on our boards. At number 4, you and I differ. You have a guy at number 4. We talked about a little bit last week. Do you want to get your thoughts on where you have Louisville's Mikel Brown?
So I have him 4. I don't feel awesome about it. Like, I feel like this next year is like pretty amorphous to me. Like, I'm not married to these rankings at all. I think with Mikel Brown, what I'm betting on is this a guy who's like 6'4", good size for a guard, can really shoot it and makes great decisions as a passer. I think my fear is like, what if this is a Ty Washington situation where this is a guy who just like does not get in the restricted area ever, does not draw fouls? Like, I think he's probably like a lesser defender than Ty was. And like, I think that's the fear. He's like, I think if he's not an awesome shooter and a truly elite processor, the floor falls out on this really fast. And that's where I'm nervous about this, but I do think he's incredibly smart and can really shoot.
100%. I agree with you about Mikel. I have a little bit of trepidation in terms of where I ultimately decided to rank him on my preseason board. I don't have him in the top 5, despite that being a pretty popular consensus ranking. We can certainly revisit that conversation in about a month or 2 months. If he's, wiping the floor with everybody at Louisville, he becomes that dominant guard in that room. They have a number of options, like we've talked about. They have Ryan Conwell transfer there. They have your guy, Adrian Woolley. There's a number of guys who can cook in that kitchen. If Mikel Brown emerges as that number 1 option in that backcourt, then we're probably going to be talking about him in a well-regarded light like we are now in this upcoming draft. My number 4 guy, we will discuss him more so when we get back from this quick break. It is Caleb Wilson out of North Carolina. I want to dig into this big forwards game when we return to this edition of the Locked On NBA Draft and No Ceilings podcast. The NBA is back. And there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Listen, right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back to the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast. Maxwell, we're going to wrap up the show here. I'm going to go very quickly on Caleb Wilson, then we're going to go rapid fire on our 5th through 7th ranked prospects. So Caleb Wilson, Maxwell had him a little bit lower on his preseason big board last week. I have him coming in at number 4, 6'10", 215-pound forward. He was the 2025 Georgia Gatorade Player of the Year. He was a McDonald's All-American, Jordan Brand Classic. He was a private high school state champion. This guy has really burst onto the scene late in this preseason process as a potential top 5 prospect. I think it's more so, Maxwell, we get into this rhythm in, late September, early October. More people are paying attention to the NBA game and sort of what's working, what's not, what are some of the trends that we're monitoring. And I think everything you see around the pro game is size, and more size. You see all of these players who are flexible between the 2 through 4 positions. They can not only handle the ball and create, but they are awesome finishers around the basket. They're transition threats. They're all over the place defensively. They have length. They can play passing lanes. They can create deflections, block shots from the weak side. These are the types of players that every NBA team is looking for, and you can't find enough of these dudes. And so when you're in a position in the NBA draft where you have a top 5, top 6, top 7 pick, and you're trying to judge what type of player can I get in this particular draft who has as high of a ceiling as I'm comfortable betting on within this specific draft range that I can't get easily in the free agent or the trade market. I think that's an aspect of drafting that's under discussed. GMs, executives, they want to find players who they can't easily acquire if they're in the position in the draft to do so. And you can't necessarily find guys like Caleb Wilson all over the place in the trade market, because if you want to try to find them, you're probably going to be giving up a lot in return to bring that type of a player in. So if you can draft someone like Caleb Wilson, who again is all over the place defensively, he is an incredible athlete at his size, excellent motor, does have to work on his jump shot, definitely has to hit some shots from the perimeter to justify being a top 4, top 5 pick, but he's the type of guy who has such a high ceiling, high character guy. Everything you hear about him at North Carolina is positive. He's determined to come in, practice, win games. That's the type of guy that I think deserves a preseason ranking. Whether he can live up to it, whether he's ready to be an NBA player, that's a different question. We'll monitor his situation throughout the year, but I just think in terms of his value at the specific archetype, specific position that he's at, I'm going to take that guy at number 4. Maxwell, really quick, why don't you run through your guys who you have on your board at 5 through 7?
Yeah, so number 5, I have Jayden Quaintance, who was at Arizona State last year, is like an underage freshman now at Kentucky. There are some really fair concerns here. Quaintance is a 6'9" big man, so like a little small for the center position, and he cannot shoot. He was 18.8% from 3 and 47.9% at the free throw line. Far from ideal. He is also the best defender, like, period, in this class, I think. He is everywhere on the court. He blocks every shot. He can guard every position. He's in passing lanes. He is a menace on that side of the ball. And I think he's also just like a great lob target. The undersized big man archetype can get dicey, but I think a lot of what you said apply. Like, if we've seen a guy like Ryan Dunn go from clanking every shot in the world to being like a passable spot up guy. And if I can get that from Jayden Quaintance, who can pass the heck out of the ball and actually dribble it a little bit, and he's only 19 years old, like, all of a sudden we're really cooking here. So Jayden Quaintance is a guy that is coming off an injury. It's a dangerous archetype, might not be able to shoot it, but I kind of want to roll the dice on the skill, the size, the movement, and the defense.
I'll do you one better, just really fast. Colin Murray Boyles with the Toronto Raptors.
Yeah, exactly.
His shooting transformation, just in terms of his confidence and his willingness to fire those babies up, looks so much different, from last year at South Carolina. So I agree with you. It's not a death sentence if a guy can't immediately shoot right out of the gate in college, if they're willing to put in the work and get it done.
Yep. Yeah. Next up, I've got Braylon Mullins. This is a guy who's going to be out to start the year. He is at UConn. He's a 6'5" sniper, unbelievable movement shooter. I think what differentiates him from a guy like Jordan Hawkins, who I see him get compared to all the time, is I think the processing and ball handling downhill is night and day. Mm-hmm. I think he can really read the floor. He can really pass it. And he was a really good defensive playmaker at lower levels. He's really quick, really good with his hands. I think he has a chance to be an impact wing and combo guard at the NBA level. At 7, I've got Ament, a guy who I kind of wax and wane on from day to day. On the plus size, he's really big. He's really fluid with the ball. He has excellent shooting indicators. He can cover a lot of ground defensively. On the negative side, he's really thin. He turns it over a lot more than he finds the open man, and he just gets bumped around a lot, given where he's at physically. So he's got a lot to work through, but I think, again, really big, really skilled. Those guys tend to be a good bet.
Love your board, 5 through 7. I'm going to run through mine really quickly. My number 5 player is Baylor's Tounde Yessoufou. He's 6'5" wing prospect, awesome length, awesome size at that guard/wing position, incredible athlete, someone who can really put pressure on the rim, get downhill, finish when he gets there, can go through guys, can finish over guys. That's the type of slasher who you want to bet on at the NBA level. I think an aspect where I've certainly fallen victim to in recent NBA drafts is I've underrated slightly just how far that first step burst and athletic profile can really take you in today's game, especially with how well the floor is spaced at the NBA level. So I'm going to buy back in on someone like Yessoufou. He has some skill questions he's going to have to answer at Baylor. Will have to shoot. It was a 32% three-point shooter in high school. That has to certainly improve to be a top 5 pick, but I think he's a willing worker. He's someone who I believe will improve the jump shot as the season goes on. I think if things get a little rough for him out of the gate, but eventually he figures it out in Big 12 play and really is a massive boon to Baylor's success, I really think he can rise back up draft boards and challenge for a top 5 to 7 spot. At 6, I have a guy who I'm taking a shot in the dark on, Peat at Arizona. A lot of people have soured on Peat. We've seen some articles when you're scouring the web talk about some little intel nuggets coming out from NBA scouts that they aren't as high on someone like Peat because they have questions about, the mid-range jumper is one thing, but can he shoot it from three-point range? Is he as good of a defender as people are profiling him? He's 6'8", 235 pounds. I think he's smarter than people give him credit for. I think he can handle the ball. I think he can make decisions off the bounce. He's an interior scorer, mid-range pull-up guy, post scorer. I buy a lot of the different skill sets that he's flashed in multiple levels of play. He's another one of these guys who seems to just win everywhere, especially in overseas play. So I'm buying that pedigree coming in. And then at number 7, like Maxwell, I also have Nate Ament, the 6'10" forward heading to Tennessee. One of these bigger wing archetypes, likes to handle the ball from the perimeter, can really knock down shots, create his own shot for himself. It's just when you project these guys out who are rail thin like Ament is, you start to ask some real questions about how's this guy going to hold up physically on the defensive end, physically on the offensive side of the ball in terms of getting downhill, creating shots at the basket. Is he going to have more of that in-between game and at the rim game that we want to see from one of these bigger profiled wings? If not, he's probably going to drop down further a little bit even than this on draft night when we get that far into the process. But if he answers those questions, Maxwell, and he is a big-time scorer in college, he has as high of an upside that you can put together a case for right now in the process as a lot of these other prospects that we've talked about. So there's a reason why he's still on the top 5 range of some scouts boards. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every day. For your second listen, go find Locked On Fantasy Basketball with Josh Lloyd. He hosts the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you win your league, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thank you all for listening. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the week.